Hello. Welcome to the stream. Happy April 1st. I don't want to say happy April Fool's Day because I don't really do that. It's a really stupid holiday. Not even a real holiday. Anyone get today off school or work? That's not a holiday. Just an excuse for stupidity. Hello. All right. As always, if my sound is fucked up, if I'm too loud, if the music's too loud, too quiet, it's more often too quiet than too loud, just let me know. And I'll make adjustments as necessary. Today we are looking at, you can see I've got a bunch of these already. We're looking at using effects to transmogrify. I chose that word very carefully. Drum loops into something else. Now, the word transmogrify, if you're not familiar with that term, that's a real word. It means transform into something monstrous, weird, horrible, whatever. And this is, it's a good term for this because there's not really much subtlety at work here. Like, this is not a way to subtly transform your drum loops. This is a way to absolutely destroy shit and turn it into something else, usually pretty wild. Oh, hey, Professor. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining. Sorry, I got a little... I literally just finished my breakfast, lunch, brunch, whatever. So I feel like I might have a little peanut butter or something stuck to my lips. So that's what I was feeling need to dab. So this is a technique that I have used on and off since ancient times, since I was doing this same thing in hardware. I think my original inspiration for this technique came from the Chemical Brothers. Read an article, interview with them back in, must have been like 94? No, it wouldn't have been that early. Must have been like 97. Somewhere between 96 and 99, anyway. I think it was around 97, maybe 1998, where they were talking about, it was within the first two albums. So after Exit Planet Dust for sure, after, oh God, what's that second album called? I can see the art in my mind's eye, but I cannot think of the album name. Anyway, one of the first two albums. They did an interview, and they were talking about, they're at the time very unique sound, very unusual, unique sound, and how they achieved it. And one of the things they mentioned is that they were like, oh yeah, so we take drum loops, breakbeats, and we jam them through old guitar pedals and crappy multi-effects and just literally anything we can get our hands on, old stereos, whatever, anything that'll distort or destroy the signal. And that's how we get some of these, crazy things. And I was like, oh, well, that's neat. That's fun. That's a cool technique. I could probably do that. I can find some I have crappy effects and drum loops. And so started working on that technique that long ago. And it's not something I use all the time, but it is something that worth keeping in your arsenal. And the more recent inspiration, the reason you're seeing this today, is that 3 days ago, earlier this week, I saw a video by Mylar Melodies, a very famous music YouTuber, musician, synthfluencer, if you will. Does a lot of modular stuff and whatever. He did a video on a new device that is like a reimagining, a rebirth of the old Sherman filter bank. It's like the same company, same people behind it who made the original Sherman filter bank have come up with this Oh, I see what's going on there. I'm like, where is this noise coming from? Okay. They've come up with a new format. It's like a new rack format, similar to the outboard, the 500 series, which is for like weird compressors and transformers, stuff like that. This is, I think they call it the 100 series. It doesn't really matter. The point is they reimagined the Sherman filter bank in a little standalone device. I watched this video. It was super cool. I was like, wow, that's cool as hell. Obviously, I'm not going to spend, it's probably like $3,000 or something like that to buy, because it's a little, you got to buy the box that mounts it and then the plug-in, and it's all very high-end, like exclusive, it's catering to a market that is a little more elevated than I am. Let's just say that. But watching the video and listening to this, I was reminded of this technique. That Sherman filter bank was the kind of thing that the Chemical Brothers were running their drum loops through back in the day. And so I was reminded of this technique, and I thought, oh, that's cool. Obviously, I can never afford this. So then I was reminded of one of my other favorite techniques, which is, as I'm watching this video, I'm like, oh, I could actually probably build this in modular. So that was my first thought, is that I would just patch it in modular. Got my modular, that's what I'm pointing at over here. My modular synth is over here to my right. And I was like, I could probably patch this in modular. And I got started thinking about what that might take. And then it occurred to me that I could probably even easier, because then I don't even have to run the drum loops into the modular because I already have them on my computer. I can probably build it just as easily, if not more easily, in Ableton, because it's a relatively simple signal flow of this device. So I decided to give that a shot first before I busted out the modular, in part because I'm working on something else in modular and I want to pull all my patch cables out to try this. And yeah, it worked really well. It reminded me how flexible and awesome this technique is. So I decided, hey, this is what we will do our video on this week. And that brings us to today. So that's how we got here. Hope you enjoyed that little journey. And now let's listen to some drum loops. Okay, so I'll have more to say about the how and why of all of this, but first, let me turn this off. So let's listen to our raw drum loops. This is kind of the raw material that we started with here. It's like 4 drum loops. Or it's 4 drum loops. It's 2 that I got out of like loop packs that I just have, and 2 that I made with the drum machine. And the 2 that I made with the drum machine are like 2 parts of the same loop, like 30 bars apart or whatever. I just was changing it throughout, and so it's 2 little clips of Volca drum. But first, so this is the first one that I did. This is from a sample pack. It has the inspiring name of EDM2 128 drum loop 17. Inspiring name. Yep. Here it sounds like this. Oh. That is not what it sounds like. Hold on. We still have a bunch of effects going. Can I turn them all off? Oh, I see. Hold on. I had another effects block on there. Okay, now let's try it. No, that's not it either. Oh, I see. Wrong track soloed. Sorry. Sometimes the most basic operations can escape me. Okay, so this is what the drum loop sounded like to begin with. Just a simple little like break beat. And then I also have this one, which is more of a 4 on the floor thing. Okay. And then that's a drum machine loop. Okay. So, okay, you get the point. These are all fine. I don't think any of them are necessarily anything special. They aren't necessarily the kind of thing that's going to leap out at you. I chose them in part because of that, because I kind of wanted to show that this is a technique that can be used with pretty much any drum loop. So if you have some drum loops that are disappointing, for example, this can be a way to spice them up. Although usually with the techniques I'm talking about, this is not for subtle changes. Let me say that. That's why I chose the word transmogrify. That was a very deliberate choice to use that terminology, because this is for really turning drum loops into something else. They can still be drummy, percussion-y, do you know what I mean? But they are thoroughly destroyed, mangled, fold, spindle, mutilate, whatever, however you want to look at it. Excuse me. So it's not just for like spicing your drums up, for the most part, unless you really want them spicy. So, okay, enough disclaimer. There's the 4 loops we used. Most of them are actually the first loop, and then I have just a few selections of the second loop and the third and fourth loops. So let's one more time. Let's listen to the first loop. Okay. Now we're going to solo this track, and we'll just listen to the first of these. Okay, so that one, for example, that's still very much a drum loop. You could use that, but as you can see, it's taken it into the realm of something else. Like, it's, instead of being this fairly polite, kind of snappy little break, it is this giant monster beast that's filling the entire spectrum, heavily distorted, gangled beyond belief. Right. All right. So here's another version 2. And so that's perhaps a better example of how this transforms it into something else. Here, you can still hear some elements of the drums coming through, but this is now more like a percussive synth piece. And less like a drum loop, right? Okay. Same thing, it's kind of like you can hear the drum element underneath, but there's so much other crap going on that it's like, is that really a drum loop anymore? And then like that one, it gets so screamy you can't even barely hear the percussion. And that transforms it almost into like a dirty percussive synth bass. That's definitely getting more into that synth territory again. So it's more percussion loop, but more, less a drum loop, more a percussion loop with some, again, sort of melodic elements that are sneaking in. Another screamer. Sounds like aliens talking. See here again, like, if I just played you this loop, I don't know that you would guess that this was a drum loop to begin with, right? I don't know that you'd hear this and be like, oh, well, clearly that was a breakbeat before you ran it through these effects. Right? Okay, so here's the second loop. Solo this again. Oops, solo. Okay. I just noticed there's it's a little late on that hit. Okay, anyway, more of a house kind of beat, right? Let's listen to some variations of that. Oops. Solo. All right, right. Right. I turned off the warping on I guess not on these. That's why they're still looping, and these are not. I turned the warping off on them. It's really neither here nor there. It's just a Ableton thing. So again, this is one that's sort of transformed beyond the point of really even knowing that that was a drum beat to begin with. Oh, and then, sorry, this one is the second drum loop run through one set of effects, and then this is actually the first one. I like that so well, I decided to try it on the first one again, and this is what I came with, and this is even better, right? So, Professor Whom says, I'm basic, I run, meaning they are basic, and they run things through ring mods and vocoders, and yes, of the examples I've played you so far, sorry, hold on a sec, getting a little warm here. Let me take my jacket off. And by jacket, of course, I mean robe, because every proper wizard wears a robe. Whenever people are like, are you really a wizard? I'm like, of course I'm a wizard. Look at the robe. Silly question. But yeah, I like that one so much that I ran it on the second loop and it sounded even better, right? Okay, and then let's check out the first of the very transformative again. Alright, and then here's the last one. And I think I turn that one into this. Anyway, yes, we were talking about ring mods and vocoders. Both of those were used in that original batch of samples. I'm going to show you my default tool here in a second, and we'll do some of these for real. So let's go back over here. We're going to solo this track, right? There's the basic drum loop. We've got the warp on and the looping. Okay, this device right here, I built this specifically to illustrate these principles. This is a toolbox of, oops, and this actually needs to be deleted. Boop. So this is kind of the core, oh my goodness. Did I? Hold on a second. Let me see if I, sorry, I had a modified version of it in there. I want to show you the raw. The raw setup that I have. What is going on here? There it is. Okay. I've helpfully called this Drum Transmogrifier A. And it is a set of 6 devices that I consider to be like the core components for doing this kind of work. I deliberately use stock effects here. The only one that's going to be like maybe a little unusual, well, only ones, are going to be the roar effect, which is Ableton Live's sort of high-end distortion. I think it only comes in Suite. It has a couple other distortions. I actually have another, a distortion of sorts in here. We'll get into that in a second. But you could certainly substitute any distortion plugin here. It doesn't have to be one that's this full-featured and fancy. You can get kind of some, distortion is, in a sense, is distortion. Obviously, some of the more advanced techniques that you can do with the multi-band distortion, like each band has both a shaper and a filter built in on this, so you can definitely get some pretty wild effects with it, and you hear some of that in my setups. But if you had like Isotope Trash or some distressor knockoff, or probably any reasonable distortion plugin should give you what you need to do this kind of thing. I did choose stock effects because some of the examples I played do branch out of the stock effects, but most of them do not. And for the actual examples I'll demonstrate here, I think we'll just stick with the stock effects because it's just more translatable to what you might have in front of you. Like if you have Logic instead of Ableton, you're going to have a different set of all of these things. But I bet you have a multiband EQ. I bet you have a pitch shifter, frequency shifter, ring modulator. Even if you don't have all those like in one, that's what the shifter in Ableton is. It's a combo multi-mode pitch shift and pitch shifter, frequency shifter, and ring modulator. And I think it also actually has a phase shifter on it. You can also shift the phase somehow as well, as I recall. So it's a pretty full-featured thing, I guess is what I'm saying. Then we have a saturator, which saturator is like a very mild distortion that is, I think it's supposed to imitate tape saturation, input saturation on preamps, things like that, rather than a more, rather than like diode style clipping or whatever. Although it does, it's got analog clip, which is a diode style clip, and digital clipping in there built in, different wave shapers. But it's a little more subtle of a distortion effect. It's usually meant to emphasize and add harmonics in specific areas. Then I have roar, which is, again, that's like the fancy distortion effect. We can also sub in, if you want, we can sub in like the overdrive effect, which is a much more simple, or the erosion effect, which are much more simple distortion effects. And an auto filter, and then finally a compressor. And one of the techniques I will talk about, so with these like 5 tools, right? 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tools. With these 6 tools, you can do a lot. And then if you have, and even I would say the shifter is actually also on the optional side. You don't have to use the shifter. You can get lots of effects even without that. If you don't have anything like that in yours, like you can certainly just use filters, distortions, and EQs. Back in the day when I was doing this in analog and with actual pedals and whatnot, that's frequently basically all I had. And like the EQ might have even just been like this crappy EQ on a stereo or something that I was jamming it through. So the tools you have are fine, is what I'm saying. Even if you have like a very basic level, like intro to Ableton Live, and are using some freebie plugins that you found online that are relatively simple or constrained, they're good enough to do this. I promise you that. Okay, so let's take let's enough talking. Let's make a drum loop, right? Okay, so let's just get this playing, and start by. So, for example, if you want to take a lot of the drum out, you can cut off all the low end, and that'll help you turn it into something that's weird. It do this really weird EQ curves that you would never do on anything else, right? Just screw around, and I'm not trying to do anything specific here. I'm literally just picking options and moving the knobs till something sounds kind of cool, and then moving on to the next stage, right? Okay, so let's do something really weird with this here. Let's start. So I'm just adding different filters to different parts of the spectrum, and then doing weird distortion stuff on that part of the spectrum as well. Okay. Adding a little feedback here. Starting to get an interesting tone up top. Okay. All right, so one of the core techniques here is duplication, right? So we start with these 5 tools, and in Ableton at least, it's very easy once you've got the tools in the rack to just, so now I have a second saturator. I just duplicated it, right? Now we're gonna move this one over to here. Duplicate the filter, and we're actually going to put this one to a notch. So obviously, you know, what you're looking for, or if you're after something specific, you know, when to stop, I guess, is the question, right? That's interesting. Ooh, listen to that. That's fascinating. I guess it's that one band on here. Okay, that's interesting. So, this has a pretty cool modulation section. So, let's see. That's wild. I mean, that's the thing, too. Sometimes while you're doing this, you find weird... weird little things going on. They're not even really sure what the heck is even happening right now. Okay. That's pretty interesting. Let's just, okay, so the next part of this technique, at least in, this is the part that if you are not using Ableton, might be a little different depending on what you are using. Because Ableton has this cool, so you see I copy this and then I'm going to click over here to an empty one and I'm going to say paste bounced audio. And that's going to give me, ooh, look at that sausage. That's ugly as hell. Wow. That's quite a track. Okay, so now we're going to solo this. And see, there's our, that's our sample, right? And yeah, okay, so we are definitely clipping that. So let's see if we can get it down a little bit. Turn the compressor. Maybe just, yeah, lower the threshold here. Try that again. Copy. Paste bounced audio. Delete this one. This should be a nicer, yeah. Got a little more headroom there so we can have a little more flexibility for later processing too. All right. And so obviously, you know, I played you what a dozen of these. I'm sure some of them you were like, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And others you're like, that actually sounds like ass, and I don't know why you bother with that. And this is definitely a, I don't want to say it's hit or miss. I mean, it's, you know, it's a year mileage may vary kind of a situation for sure. But it's a deal where sometimes, you know, things are working out and you're just producing genius, and sometimes what you're coming up with is, you know, it's fine, it's whatever. And so you just kind of have to roll with the punches. Okay, so I'm going to delete that device and I'm going to bring in my bass device again. Let's do another one. Start doing some weird EQ curve stuff. Who knows what this is even going to sound like, right? I don't know what it's going to sound like. Mentioned a ring modulator. Let's do a ring modulator. We'll really drive this, and we'll do this wave shaper one. I don't even know what that is. Roar. We'll look at the, put a feedback distortion setup on it. Put our auto filter, nice and resonant, relatively mid. And yeah, okay, so let's just hit play and see what that sounds like. Oh, sounds like the other track because that's what's soloed. There we go. Here's what we got. So right now we're, this isn't exactly subtle, but it's certainly subtle compared to what we were doing before, right? Do a comb filter on this because comb filters. Hit that with the envelope. Different models. Actually put a limiter on there as well. Limiter core set. Nope. Special. There it is. And let's put a limiter on there with a ceiling of like minus 2.3. There we go. Now we can use the compressor as more of an effect instead of using it as a limiter. So, so obviously you can once you have created these, that's the other thing too, obviously, once you've created these loops, you don't just have to use them as they are. You can, for example, in Ableton, there are these macros, and you can map so for example, let's say that you have this effect, you like this effect, but rather than just like using having this rather than having this as a always on effect, just running your drum loop through it and have it, you want to do something where this, over the course of a few bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, back half of your song, whatever it is, you decide, you're like, oh, what would be cool is if we this was all started off as nothing and then built up over the course of the track. And so what we're going to do is map the dry wet of all these to macro 1. This is a very simple macro. If I had, we could do a whole session on macro mapping and whatnot. So, okay, so right now it just has the EQ on it, which itself is something substantial, but not really. And then over time, so your 8 bars, right, you can automate this. that's obviously just the most simple macro mapping I can think of, right? Just all the wet and dries on one, no scaling, no inverse, nothing. You can get crazy with the mappings on this. You can have it go. So like, for example, maybe the saturators are always at like 70%, and you can just turn them up the last 30%, and the filters are always at like start at 20% and go up to 100 or whatever. You can add all this scaling and stuff in there. It doesn't just have to be a linear 0 to 100 for all of the things linked to the macro. They can all have their own degree, max and min limits, and you can invert some of them, things like that. And I think with the additional tools thrown in, that's just with what's built into here, Ableton's built-in thing. And again, that's Ableton, I know. You might be on Logic or Acid Pro, I don't know, whatever you're on. It's going to have similar sort of things, maybe not as elegant, maybe more elegant. I don't know exactly what's else out there. But you can do that on there for live effects. So we got about 13 minutes left, 15 minutes, let's call it 15 minutes left. So there's two things that I want to address or cover real quick in that time. So let's do that now. And the first is what purpose you might want to do this for, and the second is, oh my God, I've already forgotten. So let's just work on the purpose. So you can do this as a way to spice up your drum loops, obviously, but depending on what kind of music you're making, if you are making something that's kind of a heavier IDM, big beat like the Chemical Brothers were doing, or maybe drum and bass or drill and bass, or any of the kind of heavier, more experimental side of some of those genres, this is a pretty good technique for. It's great for techno. Like you can basically take your kick drum loop and a couple of percussion layers and this technique and make an entire techno track out of it, right? Like you just have your 4 on the floor kick drum that goes all the way through. I mean, maybe you pick it in and drop it out and pick it back in, filter it, do all the fun little techno tricks with it. But it's just a basic 4 on the floor kick drum loop, maybe with some triplets or whatever. I mean, however you want your kick drum to be. And then you could have just over that, 2 or 3 layers of percussion. Maybe one that's like hand claps and hi-hats, one that's like some kind of conga loop or something, and some toms, maybe, right? Or some fills. And then you take those and you don't need any melodic or synth elements beyond that, because you can just run all the percussion loops through these sort of effects loops and then layer those up over the kick drum and have some pretty wild techno, right? It's all linked to what your percussion and drums are doing, but it is different and unique and whatever. And you can also just use it for a little. It's great for making ear candy. And then the other thing I guess I wanted to mention is you don't have to use these loops as they are, right? Like once you get to this stage, you can be like, okay, that was fun. I'm going to turn the warp on just so I can see where all the beat markers are. Okay, that was fun. But what if I just want, 1 bar of this to use as a fill or whatever? What am I doing here? You can just take a bar of it and use it as a loop or whatever, if that's what you want to do. Or you can further cut and paste it, reverse it, run it through a beat repeat, etc. And you don't need to limit yourself. That's the other thing too. I chose these effects because I believe these are the ones that, with drums in particular, are going to be, and again, the shifter is sort of the outlier, but these are the ones that are going to be, for the most part, your core effects. This is what the core toolbox. Don't be afraid to duplicate any and all of these, to stack them up multiple times, whether you're stacking the same effect over and over again, or in a row, or split it by other things, or you're doing different settings on every one. It really is these few effects can do just so much. And so it's good. I guess what I'm saying is it's good to get a hang of this technique using sort of the core effects. The shifter can definitely get you into some of the really weird effects. Here, let's show what a frequency shifter does on the same loop. All right, we got all our... So a very different effect than the ring modulator, for example. And if we go to a pitch shifter, so yeah, shifter can give you some really wild effects, but you should not hesitate to mix in your own favorite effects. I deliberately chose to limit what we were discussing simply because, I mean, look at all this. Look at all this. This is the stock effects in Ableton, and you have amp simulators and auto pan, and then there's auto tune and beat repeat, cabinet simulator, another EQ, chorus and ensemble, a special limiter. I actually did use that at the end of the chain here. More compressors, corpus, which is like a resonator. You can definitely get some great effects with that. Delays, obviously. Drum bus, which is like a combination of compressors and distortion that's tuned for drum use. Tube emulations, space echo. That's actually a control element. That's the EQ we're using. This is another different EQ. Erosion is a distortion effect. Filter delay is an array of filters and delays. A gate and a gated delay for some gate effects, different compressor, grain delay, reverbs, limiter, multiband compressors, overdrive, pedal simulators, phasers, bit reduction, resonators. Yeah, I don't need to read you all these. You can see it keeps going. There's so many. And all of these are viable candidates, as are whatever effects you've paid for, plugins you've paid for if you have. I'm certainly not suggesting that if you have bought the Arturia effects collection, use those effects. Like, I chose these effects not because this is what you should do or what you have to do, but because I wanted to make something that was as generically applicable to as many different people as possible, rather than getting into the weeds of like, you should do this with these settings. And I know that maybe some of you are like, this is a little vague for me and I need something more concrete. And I apologize if you do need something more concrete and you want to pay me. Oh, hey, Justin, how's it going? I'll sit down with you and, help you walk through this whole process, any process, for a very reasonable rate. I'll give you some whatever training you want on this. But for the video, I'm trying to be as broadly applicable as possible so that as many people who see this might take something away from it that's useful for their productions without getting bogged down into the specifics of like, we're going to learn how to use Ableton's Roar, for example. And that's why I kind of gloss over these things and just sort of like turn up the knobs and whatever, because I'm trying to show you this is really an experimentation-based process. My goodness, I can't speak. You should plan on, if you're going to do this, setting aside, it doesn't actually take a lot of time. Like all of these loops that I generated here, this is probably 2 hours worth of work on 2 separate or 3 separate nights. Like 45 minutes the first night, half an hour each of the other nights, something like that, to come up with these sets of loops. And you can also save your macros, your groups, if you like them and want to apply, I saved a couple, not most of these actually. I just they're so quick to make, to just like put together, that it's even faster when I'm not trying to explain myself as I'm going. I'm just kind of like throwing things out there and trying them. But yeah, you should plan on, if you're going to try this out, come up with a couple of drum loops, and just plan on spending like an hour running them through different chains of effects until you see what you like, and you'll develop your own sense of what works for you. Obviously, as the more you do this, like I came up with this set of things well, two ways. One, I've been doing this, like I said, on and off. It's not a technique I use daily or anything, but it's a technique I've had in my arsenal for going on 20 years. As alarming as that is to say. So I've kind of come around, kind of come to a set of ideas of the core techniques, right? The core things that I'm going to reach for over and over again. And part of it is actually, like I said, I was trying to recreate this device, this Sherman filter bank thing, which is saturation into a filter into a compressor of sorts, right? Like that's with some modulation. That's basically what it is. Oh, and I think there might be a distortion, like an actual distortion unit in there too. So saturation, filter, distortion, compressor. And that's similar to what you see here, even if the order is a little different. So that was, again, part of the inspiration. But really, it is just like, these are what I've learned to reach for. These are the blocks that I know are always useful for this technique. And then the more exotic effects come in from all of these other things, the delays and pitch shifters. And I put the one shifter in because it's the triple, it's a pitch shift and ring modulation. It's off for like half or more of these. Most of these do not actually have a shifter element in them that I played for you. A handful of them do. And if you want a pro tip on how to get the really weird effects, some pro tips, the shifter, ring modulation, frequency modulation, and even good old pitch shifting are great for really weird alien demonic effects. Comb filters are your best friend. Moving comb filters, especially with more extreme settings and that bounce around, can give you this weird side trance, all that kind of weird shit. Bandpass filters also, if they are pushed and manipulated and pulled in different directions, pretty extreme, can give you some really wild Vocaloid sounds. Forma filters, anything that does a vocal type effect. As Professor Who mentioned, vocoder is another excellent effect that you can bring into this. I didn't have time to get into that today, but maybe another time we can look at what vocoders can do. I really like flangers. A couple of these I did with I threw the Eventide. I didn't want to like demonstrate that because I know not everyone has that plugin, but a couple of the examples I played do use, one or two of them, use the Eventide H3000 emulator for some, pitch shifting and modulation effects that I'm sure I could have gotten from the stock effects. It's just fun to play with your toys from time to time. So you can use anything. That's the point. I don't want to sit here and try and list everything. The point is you can use everything. EQ, each of these has kind of a role in the thing. EQ is for, shaping the tone in its more mild settings, and then for really fucking it up in relatively subtle, but also really fucked up ways at the more extreme settings, where if you like set the same peaks and put 3 or 4 EQs in a row, you can get some pretty weird effects where you have bands that are just like really sticking out. And saturator is for emphasizing and adding a nice warm coat, a nice coat of warmth to things. Distortion is for adding lots of wild, weird frequencies, and the filters are for focusing in on which frequencies you really want to focus in on. Compressor is for keeping it from getting out of hand and also getting some weird pumping effects and stuff like that. But really, it's just about playing around. And don't be afraid to put 5 of something in a row, 10 of something in a row, 100 of something in a row, as long as you're talking about virtual stuff. If you're doing this in hardware, you absolutely can. There, obviously, you're constrained by how many pieces of hardware you have. You only have 6 guitar pedals and, the cables to hook them up. And so, it's just a matter of rearranging those. That can be a lot of fun, too. It's obviously a lot more work to do that, but it's probably also more fun because you get to play with toys and a big table of mess, and you can take a bunch of pictures and put it on Instagram, and people think you're really cool. Whereas if you put pictures of this on Instagram, people are going to scroll right by that. It's not exciting. I can promise, for example, even though this is goes more into techniques that more people can use more often than, say, my easel video, my Make Noise easel video, this will do about 20% of the views just because it's not very visually exciting. But if you can get past that point and really learn how to manipulate these effects. And again, I really want to emphasize how much this is an experimental process. I don't want you to think that I can drop in, that I can hear something, hear a drum loop and then go, I want to turn this into this, and then just drop in the effects and know exactly what I'm after. Like I said, I have a few things that I know. The comb filter gives this kind of effect. The bandpass gives this kind of effect, etc. Use this kind of distortion for this, but that's about it. And even that frequently surprises you. You put it in. I mean, you saw how confounded I was by that weird, persistent tone at the end of that one that was just like being created by one of the distortion processes or whatever. So, yeah. So it's very much iterative. It's very much exploratory. It's very much a process that you should fire up and have fun with. And you can really use it. It is a very flexible technique, whether you are creating new layers that are not going to be drum or percussion, whether that's just a little layer of ear candy. It can be anything from it's a little bit of ear candy to it's your whole track, right? Like I said, for a techno track where you have 4 drum loops, a kick drum loop, clap and hi-hat loop, and 2 different percussion loops, and then you just process all those except for maybe the kick drum loop, and maybe you even do the kick drum loop too, and then offset it or something like that by an 1/8 note, and that's your bass line. And then you can make a whole track that way to just, you just take this and run, you're making a pop song, and you run some of your drum loops through this and just chop it up into little pieces of ear candy. Just a few of the little "wow" and "spring" sounds just become your ear candy for the track. It's good for all points in between there, right? And I do think the more experimental and out there and loud and aggressive your music is, the more useful this technique is. It is not subtle. That's, again, why I chose to call it transmogrification and not subtle transformations of drum loops. Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it. I think I've covered it. If you have questions, please let me know in the comments. If you want to see a video that drills down on one of these themes, or we spend an entire hour looking at one of these effects, or whatever, you should let me know. I guess I probably should not release this as a sample pack because 2 of these loops are not mine, and even though they are so thoroughly mutilated, mangled into something else, like when I release samples, I release them with a disclaimer that you can do pretty much anything you want with them. The one thing you can't do with them is repackage them and resell them as your own set of samples, or say run them through a distortion and then say, well, it's new stuff, so I'm going to sell this. If you took my loops, my stuff, and went this extreme with it, I wouldn't probably realize that that's what you've done. But even if you were like, hey, I took your drum or I took your loops and I ran them through these processes and this is what I come up with, I want to sell them as my own, is that okay? I would be like, oh yeah, that's definitely different enough that you can do that. But I don't want to risk that. I'm certainly not going to reach out to the people who made these loops and ask for their permission. And I don't want to take a chance of, it being a problem of getting a copyright strike, because it's just close enough for their automated thing to catch on or whatever. But so I probably won't release this as one, but maybe I'll take some of my own drum loops and release that as a sample pack. And this is something you can do with anything from again, from a breakbeat that off an almond break, a famous break, something you've heard a million times before. Works great on those. Anything, certainly if you're sampling off records and tape and whatnot, you can have a lot of texture for some of the, for the EQ to grab on. These are very clean loops, and so I had to create a lot of the texture for the saturators and distortions to grab onto. But if you're using stuff off tape or cassette or VHS or God knows what, it probably already has a lot of texture built in, and or vinyl. I said tape and cassette. I meant vinyl or cassette or VHS or whatever. It's going to have a lot of texture built in. It's going to have, your EQ can grab on and pull some of those things out, and then your saturator can cover that with a nice fuzz. It'll get picked up and emphasized by your distortion, and then you can shape that with your filters, etc., etc. Or you can use very clean drum machine loops like I'm using here, anywhere in between. It works with all that. If you know a real drummer, if you're a real drummer, you can record your own drum loops and then do this to them, and I mentioned like a techno, that you could do techno that way, but you could also absolutely do like a noise rock thing that way, where you, let's say you're a drummer and you just record yourself drumming, and then you take the loops of you drumming and run those through a bunch of effects and layer them over, and then this is what you're coming up with. You could even do it live if you had a way to control that, or a way to automate it live, envelope followers and whatnot. Lots of different possibilities. I really like this technique. I actually feel like I should use it more than I do. Maybe I will, now that I've done a video on it and spent so much time talking about it. But okay, I said I was going to be done, and then I talked for 3 more minutes, so now I'm going to be done for real. Like and subscribe. Send me money. Help feed my kids and send them to college. Download my samples. Download my synth presets. That's all on my Ko-Fi, ko-fi.com/etherdiver. Subscribe to my channel. Just turn on the notifications. Blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. I love your attention. I feed off of it. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I do this mostly because I like talking about this stuff, and it gives me someone to talk to about it. Hopefully you're finding it useful as well, and perhaps even a little bit entertaining. And if not, then hey, there's lots of other channels to watch. But yeah, I will see you all next week with a similar silly topic. We'll talk about something else in the world of sound